Genius or the genius, and there's the apostle, is a person who spreads the good word. The genius, in this case, is the person who creates it, right? We work so hard to make our ideas original, but we don't think about why we're trying to make an impact, if our impact might be better made by not having an original idea. My name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Today we're going to talk about originality, and namely that your idea for your business or whatever does not have to be original to be successful. This idea actually comes from a new book by Ryan Holiday and Stefan Hanselman, who are most famous for the book The Daily Stoic. Anyway, they have a relatively new book called The Daily Lives of the Stoics. There's actually a quote from Kierkegaard, so whole different person, whole different theorist, whole different continent that's talking about originality. Here's what they say in the book. Kierkegaard would later make the distinction between a genius and an apostle. The genius brings new light and work into the world. The genius is the prophet, the creator. The apostle comes next, a mere man or woman who communicates and spreads this message. So there's a genius or the genius, and there's the apostle, right? If you know your biblical stuff, you understand the term apostle, because apostle is a person who spreads the good word. The genius, in this case, is the person who creates it, right? We work so hard to make our ideas original, but we don't think about why we're trying to make an impact, if our impact might be better made by not having an original idea. The first thing is that genius is not in your control. You can't choose your genius. Now, Gay Hendricks talks about this in his excellent book called The Big Leap. It's still one of my favorite books. It came out like 20 years ago. He just came out with a new book. It doesn't matter. His first book was fantastic. I still listen to it regularly. And he talks about all of us having a zone of genius. Now, in this case, as far as with the quote, they're talking about the traditional genius, like Albert Einstein was a genius. That's fine. With the more modern version of it, what I'm talking about and what Gay Hendricks talks about is your zone of genius. What the heck are you good at? What comes instinctively to you, or what skill have you built up to the point where you're just great at it? For me, one of my zones of genius is communication. I love talking. I can talk to y'all all day. I can do keynotes all day. I can talk to coaching clients all day. I might be shut down afterwards, but there's so much love and enjoyment I get from it. That's a natural zone of genius. Where, parallel parking is not within my zone of genius, but I have relatives from the East Coast, where I'm originally from, who are masters at it. That's their zone of genius. It really is as simple as that. That genius isn't in your control. And as I hinted at, some of that stuff is innate, where I've always been a communicator, but some of it is actually built over time, like being able to write a sentence or being able to communicate clearly. Like I said, I love to communicate. I didn't say I always communicate clearly. Even nowadays, I sometimes have a hard time with that. So that could be my zone of genius, but that skill level might not be there, right? So genius often takes time. I've talked about that with Laura Vanderkam, who's a friend of mine who does a great book called Off the Clock, but other books where she's a time management expert. And she talks about time dividends, where you can work on something and then slowly build that skill up to the point where the skill becomes relatively easy or straightforward or instinctive to you. And then suddenly you can do that quicker. Me talking to you, I can do that relatively quick. I can do a 10-minute video, it's not a problem. And I can do that in a way that I couldn't do 10 years ago because I put in the time. So genius takes time. I recently did a show and a discussion about Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, and how they manage really well with time. But the reason why they manage really well with time is because the time they put in, and they actually give time for their craft now. So if you're focused on trying to be a genius on something, then you're not going to necessarily have the patience to just be there and be present for it. Those big ideas tend to come when we relax into it. If we're trying to be a genius about it, we tend to get tied up in the moment. Number 2, striving for genius often means we're not going to do the follow through. I talk about this in my TED talk, the power or why you should strive for good enough. See, I'm striving for good enough right now because I cannot get the words out. Why you should strive for good enough. What I talk about is that when we aim for perfection, We tend to get nothing done because we have this basic idea that might be a seed, it might be a little off, it might just need a little bit of a jigger to the left or to the right, but we don't have the patience for it because our standard's up here. Our standard's up here. So if you say, I'm gonna have a bestseller, and you haven't written a word of a book yet, you're not even a writer, then how much pressure are you gonna put on yourself, right? And so you have this rigor, to quote Natalie Nixon, the author of the Creativity Leap, you have this rigor that's to go along with the wonder. You can have those ambitions, but you gotta put the work in. And what this great quote from Kierkegaard says is that you have to understand what part of the element you're at. There is that wonder, and that might be genius, but there's also the rigor. Apostles are part of the rigor. They're saying, okay, we're gonna go ahead and take this genius idea, if you wanna codify it, you're gonna take this genius idea and we're gonna spread it to the masses. Well, it has to be in a certain form to spread it to the masses. So if you're working on a new idea, let's say you're working on a new business right now, and you're saying it has to be at this level, it has to be at this level, it has to be at this level, there's gonna be days, weeks, months where it's gonna be at this level. You want this, you want it to be 95% great, it's gonna be a long time, it's gonna be 35% great. That can be said for my books, that can be said in a meta way for this show. If you've been watching this show, I think I'm on my 100th episode right now. It's improved vastly, but those first episodes were rough, and the lighting was all off, and I was losing my words, and the editing wasn't quite right, but I had to keep going and keep going, because I'm not looking for perfection, I'm not looking for genius, I'm looking to show up for you. So once you get into that mindset, then you can put the perfection to the side. Check out my TED Talk to learn more about that. My whole point is that if you are starting something new and you're expecting it to be great, that line, that marathon becomes much longer. It's already hard to create and get something out into the world. Why make it harder? I'm gonna just make something good. I'm gonna make something to help this particular person. And that's enough. It truly is. And I've created things, including my first app, So Quotable, which was my first foray into entrepreneurship. And there are only so many users, but those users use it all the time. My second app had 250,000 users. It was called Cuddler. It felt the same. But that's because I was making an impact. One could be considered very humble and one could be considered very great. They're both great to me because of my intentions with it. Lastly, advocacy can be just as powerful as genius. There's a strength in improving the now. If you want to make an impact on people, and I just recently heard this from Adam Grant in his new book, Think Again. If you want to make an impact on people, the best thing you can do is create it in a consistent way and explain to them why things aren't going to change that drastically. For instance, if you're trying to get more people to eat peanut butter, and right now they're eating jelly, then maybe there's a certain way where you can say, hey, we're gonna add peanut butter to your jelly. We're not gonna get rid of the jelly, but we're gonna add some peanut butter, just a little bit. You can tell I have kids, but just a little bit of peanut butter, and let's get in there, and that'll get you your protein. That's healthier than jelly because jelly is a lot of sugar. It can be very processed. Peanut butter, we got the natural peanut butter, we'll take care of you. That becomes a bridge. Before you know it, that peanut butter and a jelly might be 50-50. It might get to the point where it's just a peanut butter sandwich and they're getting a healthier meal. But just saying we're not gonna have jelly anymore, you're gonna have peanut butter sandwiches, that's a little aggressive. If you're focused on converting people to your so-called genius, and I don't mean that as a slam, I think we all think we have these great ideas, without saying, hey, there's something that's similar that I believe in, that's not quite as radical as my big idea, but it's something that I think is fascinating, that's worth carrying, I will be a supporter of that. And a few things begin to happen. The first thing is that you'll realize that some of the people that you're getting support for this other thing for, that you're an apostle for this other thing, they'll start to ask you about your thing. Talking about Adam Grant's book, Think Again. I know Adam Grant. We emailed back and forth. We met at TED a few years ago. He's a super cool guy. Our books came out at the exact same time, My book, Built From Now, came out a week before his. Think again. He has a little bit better promotion, but I appreciate the support that I got from him, and I love supporting him as well. Our books have a similar discussion, but me talking about his book actually gets insight and likes and curiosity about my book. Just like when he gave me a shout out on my book over the last month or so, then that gave people permission, as far as with my community, to check out his stuff. So it's not a matter of just reciprocity, but also if you become an apostle for the things that you really care about that are tangentially or even directly supportive of the things you believe in, not only does that uplift the community, and not only does that get the ego out of the way, but also gives opportunity and lays the groundwork for you to succeed at your particular genius too, right? So something about the cooperation of that. And we tend to forget that because we want to be our own genius. But sometimes there's other people doing great work too. And by you supporting them or their ideas, you might actually indirectly get attention to your own work. And that's something to think about. It's not a matter of it being a scarcity mindset or scarcity model, but that attention and those discussions and that support has to do with uplifting the community, not just shining on your ego. So keep that in mind if you're worried about being a genius versus being an apostle for someone else's stuff. If you want more insight into your business and creative ways that you can use your resources, come on over to buildfromnowquiz.com, buildfromnowquiz.com. It's based on my new book, Build From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. It's a free quiz, 2 minutes, multiple choice. I think it's like 4 or 5 questions. You'll breeze through it, and then you'll come out of it and know which of the 4 resources are most valuable to you and most abundant to you at that moment. And once you understand that, then you can make a bigger impact on the world. I'd love for you to come through, as approaching 1,000 of y'all that have already. So thank you for the love and support. Until next time, remember that you can always bring your worth and that you can always build from now. Take care.